The day my son came back to my doorstep, he wasn't the man I once knew. He stood there with his wife, dragging heavy suitcases, their faces pale, their eyes hollow like they had been crawling back from the ruins of their own choices. They thought I would open my arms instantly. They thought time had erased the pain. But what they didn't know was that the moment I opened that door, nothing would ever be the same again. I never thought I'd live to see the day when my own son would turn his back on me. But life has a cruel way of teaching us lessons we never asked to learn. His name is Devin, and to me, he was everything. My pride, my reason to keep working through aching bones and sleepless nights. The reason I kept going after his father died so suddenly on that cursed construction site. Devin was only 8 when it happened, and from that day forward, it was just the two of us against the world. I raised him in this modest 2-story home on the north side of Detroit. Every brick and corner soaked with sacrifices he would never fully understand. I gave him my youth, my health, every dollar I earned as an administrative assistant in a small accounting office. I stretched pennies into meals, turned worn-out shoes into another year's use, and poured my heart into raising a boy who I believed would one day stand proud and say, "That's my mother." For a long time, I thought my devotion had been worth it. Devin studied hard, graduated as an engineer, and landed a good job that promised stability and success. I believed my sacrifices had bloomed into something beautiful. But then Candace entered our lives like a hurricane dressed in designer heels. She called herself Candy, as if life was nothing more than a sweet treat meant to be devoured, and she devoured my son whole. From the very first moment, I knew she saw me as nothing more than an obstacle. Her eyes scanned me like I was an old, outdated piece of furniture, the kind you can't wait to toss out. She barely shook my hand the first day we met, her nose slightly lifted, her manicured fingers brushing mine for the briefest second before she pulled away as if even that small contact had soiled her dot. It wasn't long before she made sure Devin saw the world through her eyes. The home I had worked myself to the bone for, the one I bought with his father's life insurance money so we'd never have to beg for shelter, suddenly became a dusty little box. My cooking, the meals that had kept Devin strong and healthy through his childhood, suddenly became greasy takeout. The furniture I had saved years to buy became garbage from the side of the road. She never said these things quietly. No, Candace had a way of making sure her words cut deep, sharp enough for Devin to hear, sharp enough to make me bleed inside. At first, Devin would laugh nervously, placing a hand on my shoulder and whispering, "Don't mind her, Mom. She's just used to a different lifestyle." A different lifestyle. That phrase became a knife twisted into my chest, over and over again, because what did that make me? An inconvenience, a relic, a poor old woman who had nothing left to give. Still, I bit my tongue and kept trying. I cooked, I cleaned, I welcomed them into my home. After they married, I gave them the largest room, the one overlooking the little garden where Devin used to play as a boy. I laid out fresh sheets, hung new curtains, and even painted the walls myself to make it feel new. I thought they would see that I was trying, that my love was enough to build a bridge between us. But Candace was not a woman who built bridges. She was the kind who burned them just to watch the flames. 3 months after they moved in, she finally convinced Devin to leave. I still remember that day with the clarity that haunts me. An imported luxury car pulled up in front of my house, polished to a mirror shine. The kind of car people stopped to stare at. It was sent by her mother, Vivian Sterling, a millionaire widow with mansions, servants, and a reputation for crushing anyone who stood in her way. That car was a symbol, a reminder that I would never be enough for her daughter or for my son who had chosen her. Candace's words that day still echo in my ears. She stood on my porch, her lips curled into a smirk, and shouted loud enough for the neighbors to hear, "Rot in that dusty old house, you washed-up old-timer." Her voice rang out, venomous and triumphant, as if she had finally won some battle against me. Devin didn't defend me. He didn't even look at me. He just loaded their luggage into the trunk, climbed into the driver's seat, and sped away toward the life of grand estates and glittering lies. I stood there frozen, my heart a hollow drum inside my chest, watching the only person I had left vanish into the horizon without so much as a goodbye. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months. Not a single call, not one text, as if I had died to them, and perhaps in their world, I had. The silence was deafening, a reminder that love, no matter how fierce, can be forgotten when ambition whispers in the right ear. I spent nights sitting on the edge of my bed, staring at the empty corner where Devin's childhood toys used to be. wondering if I had done something wrong. Had I been too strict, too soft, not enough? But then something shifted inside me. It didn't happen all at once, it never does. It was small things. The way the house looked in the morning light when I opened the curtains, the taste of fresh coffee I brewed just for myself, the sound of my neighbor's little girl laughing outside. It was as if the world was reminding me that I was still alive. And maybe, just maybe, life wasn't over for me just because they had left. I began to clean the house, not because Candace said it smelled old, but because I wanted it to shine for me. I started walking in the evenings, letting the cool air wash away the heaviness in my chest. I even dug up the weeds in the garden, planting flowers where Devon once played. Slowly, painfully, I began to find myself again. I wasn't just a mother abandoned by her son. I was a woman, still standing, still breathing, still capable of living. And yet, no matter how much strength I found in those small victories, a part of me still longed for Devon. A part of me still waited for him to come back. And then, one Thursday afternoon, just as the leaves outside were turning gold, I heard a knock at the door. I opened it to find them standing there, Devon and Candace, dragging the same suitcases they had taken away, their faces pale, their eyes filled with defeat. They weren't arriving in a luxury car this time. They had come in a beat-up rideshare, the driver looking at them with thinly veiled curiosity. Devon's shoulders were hunched, Candace's eyes no longer glittering with arrogance, but shadowed with something that almost looked like fear. They stood on my porch, shivering in the cold, their lips trembling as they looked at me. For a moment, none of us spoke. Time seemed to hang suspended between us, a thick, suffocating silence. Then Candace whispered, almost too softly for me to hear, "Can we come in?" The driver, Tony, looked at me expectantly, as if even he wanted to see what I would do. What they didn't know was that the woman standing before them was not the same broken mother they had abandoned 3 months earlier. I was someone entirely different now, and the way I received them would leave even Tony completely stunned. But to understand what happened next, to understand the fire that now burned in me, I need to take you back to the beginning, back to the years before everything fell apart, because only then can you truly understand why. When they came crawling back, I didn't just open the door, I made them face the truth they had tried so hard to escape. 3 months, that's how long it had been since Devon and Candace left in that glossy black car, their suitcases stacked like trophies of victory, their smiles painted with cruel satisfaction. 3 months since Candace's voice had cracked the stillness of the neighborhood with that vicious parting shot, wrought in that dusty old house. You washed up old-timer. 3 months since my son, the boy I had raised with blood and bone, had turned his back on me without so much as a word. At first I thought the silence would kill me. The house, once full of noise and laughter and arguments and the simple rhythm of family life, now echoed with emptiness. I would catch myself setting the table for 3 instead of 1. Only to put the extra plates back into the cabinet with trembling hands. I'd glance at the upstairs window where their light used to shine late into the night, only to find it dark, lifeless. Every corner of the house felt heavier without them, as though their absence had seeped into the walls themselves. The nights were the worst. I would lie in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying every memory of Devon growing up. His first steps on the living room carpet, his laughter echoing through the backyard as he chased fireflies, the way he used to curl up beside me after a nightmare, whispering, "Don't let go, Mama." How could that same boy, my boy, now belong to someone else entirely? Someone who looked at me with contempt, as if I were nothing more than a stain on her perfect life. For weeks, I blamed myself. Maybe I had failed him. Maybe I hadn't given him enough. Maybe if his father hadn't died, things would be different. I spent long hours sitting by the window, staring at the street as if he might drive by, as if he might remember that the woman who raised him was still here, waiting. But the street remained empty, and my phone stayed silent. And yet, somewhere deep inside me, something began to shift. At first, it was small, a whisper of defiance against the crushing loneliness. One morning, I woke up and instead of lying in bed drowning in sorrow, I opened the curtains. The light streamed in, warm and golden, and for the first time in weeks I saw the dust floating in the air like tiny stars. I realized Candace was right about one thing: the house did smell old, stale, forgotten, but not because it was worthless, because I had stopped living in it. So I started to live again. It began with the kitchen. I scrubbed every counter, polished every pot, and rearranged the shelves the way I wanted them, not the way Candace had criticized. I cooked for myself, not for approval, and discovered that the taste of my own meals filled me with comfort. My fried chicken, my mac and cheese dishes Candace had mocked became little reminders that I still had something to give, even if it was just to myself. Next came the garden. The weeds had taken over while I spent my days mourning, but I rolled up my sleeves and dug my hands into the earth. I planted marigolds, petunias, and tomatoes, the way I used to when Devon was little. As the flowers bloomed, so did a quiet strength inside me. Each petal was proof that life could still grow, even after storms. Then came my body. For years, I had worked myself ragged, carrying the weight of 2 lives after my husband died. My back ached, my knees protested, but I decided to fight back. I began walking in the evenings, circling the block while the sun dipped low, and painted the sky with fire. Neighbors began to nod at me again, smile at me. For the first time, I didn't feel invisible. The more I walked, the more I thought, and the more I thought, the clearer it became. Candace's poison had been eating me alive long before she left. Her words, her sneers, her disdain, I had let them define me. But without her here, without Devon's silence pressing down on me, I started to hear my own voice again, and my voice told me one thing: I was not finished. One Sunday, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went to church, not out of duty, but because I needed to be reminded that I wasn't alone. As I walked through the doors, faces turned toward me. Some surprised, others warmly welcoming. People I hadn't spoken to in months embraced me, asked how I was doing. For the first time in a long time, I told the truth. I'm struggling, but I'm trying. And instead of judgment, I was met with kindness. Slowly, I began to rebuild a life that wasn't defined by who stayed or who left. I volunteered at the community center, helping young kids with homework just as I had once helped Devon. I joined a quilting circle, laughing with women my age who shared stories of heartbreak and resilience. I even dusted off my old typewriter, the one I had kept in the attic for years, and started writing down pieces of my life memories, lessons, stories I never wanted to forget. And then came the day when I realized I had changed. It was a Thursday afternoon, warm but breezy, and I had just finished watering the garden. I sat on the porch with a glass of lemonade, my hands dirty from the soil, when it hit me. I didn't feel empty anymore. Yes, I missed Devon. Yes, I wished things had been different. But I wasn't broken. I wasn't worthless. I was alive, and I was stronger than I had ever been. But strength has a strange way of being tested the moment you find it. Because that very same Thursday, just as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in hues of orange and pink, I heard footsteps on the porch. A hesitant knock followed, soft but desperate. I opened the door, and there they were, Devon and Candace, standing before me with the same suitcases they had carried away 3 months earlier. But this time, the shine was gone. There was no luxury car waiting at the curb. Instead, a beat-up rideshare idled on the street, the driver watching with mild curiosity. Devon's shoulders slumped, his eyes hollow, as if life had drained the spark from him. Candace's hair, once perfectly styled, was frizzed and unkempt, her eyes darting nervously. They looked nothing like the triumphant couple who had abandoned me. They looked defeated. For a long moment, none of us spoke. The silence hung heavy, broken only by the hum of the car engine outside. Finally, Candace whispered, her voice cracking, "Can we come in?" Even the driver leaned forward, as if waiting to see my answer. But what they didn't know, what no one knew, was that I was no longer the woman they had left behind. The 3 months without them hadn't destroyed me. They had transformed me, and the way I received them that day left even Tony, the stranger who drove them here, completely stunned. But before I tell you how that moment unfolded, you need to understand something. You need to know the full story of what happened in those final weeks before they left. The last bitter fights, the betrayals, the words that cut deeper than any knife, because only then will you understand why I stood so tall that day, why I didn't crumble at the sight of them, and why, when they came crawling back, I had the power to decide if the door would open or remain closed forever. People think that moving into a mansion means moving into paradise. Candace certainly believed it. When she and Devon first hauled their suitcases across Vivian Sterling's polished marble floors, she thought she had finally arrived. She walked through those vast rooms with her chin high, running her fingers over golden banisters, soaking in the smell of imported candles, admiring the endless rows of sparkling chandeliers. To her, this was home. To Devon, at least at first, it was proof that Candace had been right. that maybe leaving me behind was the price of building a better future. But beneath the shine, there were cracks. Vivian Sterling was not a woman who offered generosity freely. Every gesture, every luxury, came at a cost. She greeted Devon not with warmth, not with the pride of a mother welcoming her daughter's husband, but with the cool smile of a businesswoman making an investment. Her eyes sharp gray and cold studied him as if he were a number in her ledger. And from the very first day, the message was clear. In her house, everything had rules. Breakfast was at 8 sharp, not 8:05, not 8:10. Latecomers would find the plates cleared away. Shoes were to be polished daily. Jackets hung in the west closet, not the east. No guests without approval. No noise after 10. Every corner of the house whispered of her control. Even the servants, dressed in crisp uniforms, moved like ghosts, silent but watchful, afraid to break Vivian's unspoken laws. At first, Candace thrived under it. She liked rules when they weren't hers to follow. She liked the feeling of wealth, the glances from people who envied her when she drove into the city in Vivian's luxury cars. She liked the way her friends gasped when she sent them photos of herself lounging by the mansion pool, a cocktail in her hand. She thought she had won. Devon, however, began to feel the weight of it. The mansion wasn't a home, it was a gilded cage. Every morning he had to account for where he was going, what he was doing, and when he would be back. Vivian's questions weren't asked with concern but with suspicion, as though he were a servant whose time belonged to her. One evening, Devon came home later than usual. He had stayed at work finishing a project, proud of his dedication, thinking maybe his efforts would finally earn respect in the Sterling household. Instead, he walked into a storm. Vivian sat at the long dining table, Candace beside her, both with untouched plates. Her voice was low, cutting. Dinner was served at 7. Devon, it is now 7. Do you think my household runs on your time? Devon tried to explain, his words tumbling over each other, but Vivian's gaze silenced him. He ate in silence, every bite tasting like ash, while Candace sipped her wine with a smile that never reached her eyes. Nights became colder, conversations shorter. Devon found himself longing for things he had once taken for granted. The freedom to walk into a kitchen at midnight for a snack, the warmth of someone who asked, "How was your day?" without judgment, the laughter of a mother who never demanded perfection. He thought of me, though he tried to push it away. He remembered the smell of fried chicken, the sight of my garden blooming in summer, the softness of my worn couch where he had fallen asleep countless times. But then he would glance at Candace, radiant in her expensive clothes, and force himself to believe this was the life he chose. The turning point came the night Candace humiliated him. They were at a party. Vivian hosted, grand, glittering, filled with powerful people. Devon had always been shy in such crowds, but he tried his best to stand tall beside his wife. At some point, a guest asked Candace how she managed to balance her glamorous lifestyle with marriage. Candace laughed lightly and said, "Oh, Devon, he's reliable, like an old pair of shoes. Nothing exciting, but at least he doesn't fall apart." The table erupted in laughter. Devon's face burned, but Candace only leaned back in her chair, basking in the attention. Vivian's thin smile never wavered. That night, Devon lay awake staring at the ceiling of their guest's suite, a room larger than our entire house, but colder than any place he had ever known. He thought of me again, my sacrifices, my love, my unwavering support, and for the first time, shame sank its claws deep into his chest. The cracks in the mansion grew wider after that. Candace's sharp tongue no longer sounded playful but poisonous. Vivian's rules no longer felt like order, but chains. Devon began to realize that wealth, without love, is nothing more than emptiness in disguise. 3 months in that mansion felt like a lifetime. And when Vivian finally turned her cold gaze on Candace one evening and said, "It's time you two started standing on your own," Devon knew their golden dream had ended. The luxury cars were no longer at their disposal. The servants no longer answered their calls. The mansion, which once sparkled with promise, suddenly became suffocating. And so, with the same suitcases they had carried in, Devon and Candace packed their belongings, their pride shattered, their illusions destroyed. They called a rideshare because Vivian refused to send one of her cars. As they climbed into the back seat, neither spoke. Devon stared out the window, his mind filled with memories of a modest two-story house on the north side of Detroit, the house Candace had mocked, the house he had abandoned, the house where I still lived. And though he didn't say it out loud, deep in his heart he knew it was the only place left where they might find shelter. It was a rainy Tuesday evening when I heard at the knock. Not the polite tap of a neighbor asking for sugar. Not the friendly rhythm of a friend dropping by, but a desperate, uneven pounding that echoed through my hallway. I froze where I stood, dish towel in hand, staring at the front door. Something in my bones already knew who it was. When I opened it, there they stood. Devon, my son, my only child, his suit wrinkled, his hair damp, his eyes hollow as though he hadn't slept in days. Beside him, Candace, her expensive coat clinging to her like a wet rag, mascara streaking down her cheeks. At their feet, 2 suitcases sat, water dripping from their wheels. For a long moment, none of us spoke. The rain filled the silence, hissing on the porch, tapping against the windows. My heart beat like a drum. Finally, Candace broke first. Her voice was thin, fragile. We need a place to stay." Her words hung in the air, heavy, almost unbelievable. This was the same woman who had once sneered at my modest home, who had looked me in the eye and told me I wasn't good enough for her son. And now here she was, standing in the rain with nowhere else to go. Devon couldn't meet my eyes. He looked down at the ground like a child caught stealing, his shoulders hunched under the weight of shame. My hands trembled as I gripped the doorknob. 1,000 emotions rushed through me: anger, sorrow, vindication. Part of me wanted to slam the door shut and let them feel the cold they had chosen. But another part of me, the part that still remembered the boy I had raised, the child who used to crawl into my lap with scraped knees and tear-streaked cheeks, couldn't turn away. "Come in," I whispered. They stepped inside, dragging their luggage across the old wooden floor. The house smelled of roasted chicken and fresh bread I had been cooking to pass the evening, and I saw Candace inhale, as if the scent reminded her of something she hadn't tasted in months. The atmosphere was thick with silence. Devon sat at the edge of the couch, his hands clasped, his head bowed. Candace wandered the room with her eyes, her gaze falling on the family photos she had once dismissed. She stopped at one in particular, a picture of Devon at 10 years old, grinning with a missing tooth, his arms slung around my shoulders. Her lips trembled. She looked away. I wanted to ask 1,000 questions. Why now? What happened? Was Vivian Sterling's mansion not enough? But I kept my voice steady, because if I asked, the wound inside me might split open. "Why are you here?" I asked quietly. Devon's voice cracked when he spoke. We don't have anywhere else to go, Mom." He lifted his eyes at last, and for the first time in years, I saw something raw in them. Not pride, not arrogance, but desperation. Candace, usually so sharp-tongued, so quick to dominate every room, stayed silent, her hands twisted in her lap, her chin trembling. The truth spilled out in fragments over the next hour. Vivian Sterling had cut them off. No more lavish parties, no more luxury cars, no more endless flow of money. Candace had clashed with her over control, and in Vivian's world, anyone who challenged her was disposable. Devon had lost his footing at work, distracted by the constant pressure of the Sterling household. Together, they had gone from feeling like royalty to being nothing more than unwelcome burdens. Now, they had nowhere to turn, no friends who would take them in, no family on Candace's side willing to help, only me. The irony burned like fire in my chest. The woman they had left behind, the home they had called too small, was now the only shelter left. But I also knew this: letting them back into my home would not be simple. Wounds like ours don't heal overnight. Trust once broken does not mend with a single knock at the door. As I watched them sit there, broken in ways I had never seen, I realized this was only the beginning. Their return wasn't the end of the story. It was the start of something far more complicated, something that would test every ounce of strength in me, and force Devon and Candace to face truths they had long buried. And though I let them stay, I whispered silently to myself, "This time, things will be different." The first night they spent back in my house was the quietest I'd ever known. No footsteps upstairs, no television buzzing, no laughter or arguments drifting down the hall, just silence. I had given them the same room I once prepared years ago, back when I believed they'd only stayed temporarily. The fresh sheets, the curtains I'd sewn myself, the small wooden dresser, everything still stood in its place, but it looked different now. The room wasn't a symbol of welcome anymore. It was a reminder of everything that had gone wrong. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. My heart ached with a confusing mix of emotions: relief that my son was home, anger that it took failure to bring him back, bitterness toward Candace for all the cruel words she had thrown at me, and a small, quiet voice deep down that whispered, "They need you. Don't harden your heart just yet." By morning, I smelled coffee. Not the kind from fancy imported beans, just the simple blend I always bought. Devin was in the kitchen, sitting at the table with a mug in his hands. He looked older than he had 3 months ago, more tired, more worn down, like life had beaten him into someone I barely recognized. Candace appeared a few minutes later. Her hair was unbrushed, her expensive pajamas creased from sleep. She didn't look like the perfectly polished woman who used to strut around my living room, dismissing everything with a wrinkle of her nose. She looked human. But that didn't last long. When I set down a plate of scrambled eggs and toast, Candace pushed it away almost instantly. "I don't usually eat this much bread," she muttered, her voice soft but still carrying that edge I remembered. I didn't reply. I just sat across from them, watching. Devin tried to break the silence. "Mom, I'm sorry. For everything. For how we left. For how long it's been." He couldn't even finish the words before his voice cracked. But Candace stayed silent, her eyes fixed on the table. As the days passed, the cracks widened. She complained about the small bathroom, about the creaky stairs, about the neighbors who were too loud. But this time, there was no arrogance behind her. Words only, restlessness, fear, as if the walls of my modest home were closing in on her. I watched her one evening from the kitchen window. She stood in the backyard, staring at the chain-link fence, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. She looked lost, as though she didn't know who she was without the glittering world Vivian Sterling had built around her. Devin, meanwhile, he helped fix the leaky faucet in the kitchen. He raked the leaves in the front yard. He sat with me in the evenings, asking questions about my days, things he hadn't cared to ask in years. It was clear he wanted redemption. But redemption doesn't come easy, because no matter how many times I tried to forgive, I couldn't shake the memory of that day. The way he loaded his suitcases into Vivian's luxury car without looking back at me, leaving me standing on the porch with her cruel words echoing in my ears. Now, with them back under my roof, I began to realize something chilling. Letting them inside the house was easy. Letting them back inside my heart, that was another battle entirely. And as tension thickened between us, I sensed something was going to break. For weeks, I kept my patience. I cooked meals. I cleaned. I tried to bite my tongue when Candace sighed at the squeaky floors or rolled her eyes at the outdated curtains. I told myself, she's hurting. She's adjusting. Give her time. But time did nothing. If anything, the air in the house grew heavier, thicker, with unspoken anger. One evening, I came home from the grocery store with 2 heavy bags. The kitchen light was on, and I could hear voices. I stepped inside quietly, and that's when I heard Candace. "This place is suffocating, Devin. I can't live like this. It smells old. It feels old. It's like being trapped in a cage." My chest tightened. Devin's voice came next, low but firm. "Candace, this is my mother's home. Show some respect." "Respect," she scoffed. "She doesn't respect us. She's judging me every second we're here. You think I can't feel it? She's just waiting for me to fail again." Her words cut like knives. I pushed the bags onto the counter louder than necessary, and they both froze. The room went silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. Candace's face stiffened, her lips pursed. Devin looked down at the table, ashamed. I stared straight at her. "You think this house is a cage? Let me remind you, this cage is the only reason you're not out on the street tonight." Her cheeks flushed red, her hands balled into fists. "I didn't ask you for charity," she snapped. I laughed bitterly. "Charity? No, Candace, you begged at my door. Don't twist it into something else." Devon stood up quickly, trying to calm the storm. "Mom, please." But I wasn't finished. Years of swallowed words came pouring out. "Do you know what it felt like, Candace? Watching you drive away, laughing at this house, mocking everything I built with my own 2 hands. Do you know what it's like to sacrifice every dream you have for a child? Only to watch him throw it all away for someone who sneered at the roof over his head." The words hung in the air like thunder. Candace's eyes filled with tears, but they weren't soft tears, they were angry, burning. She slammed her hand against the table. "Maybe if you weren't so small, so bitter, so stuck in your little world, Devin wouldn't have felt like he had to escape." The silence that followed was suffocating. Devin's face turned pale, his fists trembling at his sides. I whispered more to myself than to her. "Escape from me." I gave him everything, everything I had. For a moment, I thought I might collapse right there. Devin suddenly shouted, his voice shaking the walls. "Enough, both of you." We froze. I had never heard him raise his voice like that, not to me, not to anyone. His chest heaved as he looked between us, torn in half. "I can't keep living like this," he whispered. "I made mistakes. We both did. But if this house is going to become a battlefield, then maybe we don't belong here after all. The room went still. The words stung, but they were true. Candace stormed off to the bedroom, slamming the door so hard the picture frames rattled on the walls. Devin stayed at the table, his head in his hands. And me, I stood there in the middle of my kitchen, the groceries forgotten, my heart pounding with rage, grief, and a terrifying realization. This was only the beginning of the war. The house was different after that night. The walls seemed colder, the air heavier, like the fight had left a permanent scar on every room. Candace avoided me. She stayed upstairs most of the time, coming down only when Devon was home. When our paths crossed, she barely looked at me. Her sharp tongue was gone, replaced by silence that screamed louder than any insult she had ever thrown. But I noticed things. She ate the food she once refused, quietly, slowly, as if she hated admitting she needed it. She washed her own clothes in the old machine she used to mock, waiting until late at night when she thought I was asleep. And one afternoon, when I came back from the market earlier than usual, I caught her in the living room. She was holding the same photo she'd looked at before Devon as a boy, grinning with his missing tooth, his arms slung around me. Her hand trembled as she touched the glass. When she noticed me, she quickly set it back on the shelf, her face flushed. Something inside her was breaking, though she fought to hide it. Devon, meanwhile, was torn. He spent long hours at work, trying to rebuild the career he had nearly destroyed under Vivian Sterling's shadow. At night, he tried to sit with me, asking about my day, repairing small things around the house, trying to stitch together the bond we had lost. But when Candace sulked in silence upstairs, he rushed to her side. I could see the guilt tearing him apart. Guilt for abandoning me, guilt for choosing her, guilt for failing at the life he thought he wanted. One evening, I found him in the backyard, sitting on the old wooden bench my late husband built years ago, his shoulders slumped, his face buried in his hands. "Devon," I said softly. He looked up, his eyes red. "Mom, I don't know what to do anymore. About what, her, you, everything." His voice cracked. "I wanted to give her the world. I thought I could be the man who made her dreams come true. Instead, I dragged her here, back to the life she despises. And I dragged you into it too." I sat beside him, my hand resting gently on his arm. "Devon, life isn't about castles and riches. It's about roots. And you can't grow roots in someone else's mansion. You grow them where there's love." He nodded, but his eyes carried doubt. The next morning, I found Candace in the kitchen. She looked pale, worn, her usual armor of perfection gone. For the first time since she stepped into my home, her voice wasn't sharp, it was trembling. I don't know how to do this," she whispered. I froze, unsure what she meant. She gripped the counter, her eyes glistening. "I don't know how to live without all of it. The house, the servants, the comfort. I've never had to struggle, not like this. And now, I feel like I'm drowning." Her voice cracked, and for a fleeting second, I saw her not as the cruel daughter-in-law who had mocked my home, but as a frightened woman stripped of her illusions. I didn't reply. Not yet, because in that moment, I realized something vital. Candace was finally facing the one thing she had always run from, reality. And whether she would break completely or rise stronger from it was a battle only she could fight. It had been 6 weeks since Devon and Candace returned to my house. 6 weeks of uneasy silence, small efforts at peace, and long nights where guilt and resentment whispered through the walls. And then, Vivian Sterling returned. It was a Sunday afternoon. I was on the porch trimming the roses when a sleek black car rolled up to the curb. The windows gleamed like mirrors, the engine hummed like money itself. My heart sank the moment I saw it. The back door opened, and out stepped Vivian, tall, immaculate, dressed in a designer coat that probably cost more than my yearly salary back at the office. Her blonde hair pinned perfectly, her lips painted the kind of red that warned you not to cross her. She didn't look like a woman who had just thrown her daughter and soon-in-law out. She looked like a queen coming to inspect her subjects. She glanced at my modest little home with thinly veiled disgust before fixing her eyes on me. "So this is where they've been hiding," she said smoothly, as though my house was a cave rather than a home. Before I could reply, the front door creaked open. Devon stepped out first, his face pale, his jaw tight. Candace followed slowly, her breath catching when she saw her mother. "Mother," she whispered. Vivian spread her arms like a benevolent ruler. "Darling, you look dreadful. Come now, let's not be dramatic. I've come to take you home." My chest tightened. Home. After everything, after casting them out without a second thought, Candace froze on the porch steps. Her eyes darted from her mother's gleaming car to my little garden, to Devon standing awkwardly beside her. I could see it the war inside her, the life of luxury she'd always craved versus the hard reality she'd begun to face under my roof. "No," Devon said suddenly, his voice sharp. Vivian turned her icy eyes on him. "Excuse me, we're not going back," he said firmly. His hands trembled, but his voice didn't. "You used us, threw us away when we didn't fit your plans. We're not walking back into your world just so you can do it again." For the first time, Vivian's flawless expression cracked. Her eyes narrowed. "You ungrateful boy. I opened doors for you. I gave you access to a world you could never touch on your own. And this," she swept her hand toward me, toward the house. "This is what you choose." Candace swallowed hard. Her lips trembled. "Mother," she whispered. Vivian stepped closer, lowering her voice into a razor-sharp hiss. "Candace, come with me. Leave this mediocrity behind. You don't belong here." The silence that followed was unbearable. Every breath felt heavy. I waited for Candace to walk down those steps, to slip back into the world she always believed she deserved. But instead, she took a step back, toward me. "No," she whispered, louder this time. "I can't. Not anymore." Vivian's face froze, her red lips parting in shock. "What did you just say?" Candace's voice shook, but she didn't look away. "I said no. I've lived in your world. I know what it feels like to have everything yet nothing real. Here," she glanced at Devon, then at me. "At least here there's honesty. There's love." Vivian's face twisted with fury. Her perfect mask shattered for the first time. She spat the words like venom. "You're making the biggest mistake of your life." She turned sharply, her heels clicking against the pavement, and slid back into the black car. The door slammed, the engine roared, and just like that, she was gone. The silence she left behind was deafening. Devon exhaled shakily, gripping Candace's hand. Candace's eyes glistened with tears, but there was something new in them, something I had never seen before. Humility. And maybe, just maybe, a spark of change. The night after Vivian left the house was heavy with silence again, but it wasn't the same silence as before. It was softer, calmer, like the air after a storm. Candace sat at the kitchen table long after Devon went to bed, her hands cupped around a mug of tea she hadn't touched, her eyes fixed on the table. I moved quietly around her, putting away dishes, not wanting to intrude. Finally, she spoke. "I never thought I'd say this," she whispered, her voice trembling, "but I was wrong. About you, about this house, about everything." Her words hit me like a stone in still water, sending ripples through my heart. She looked up at me then, and for the first time since the day I met her, her eyes weren't filled with contempt. They were filled with something raw, something human. "I treated you like you were beneath me. I mocked everything you worked for, everything you gave up. But when my mother turned her back on me, you still opened your door." Her voice broke, and a single tear slipped down her cheek. "I don't deserve your kindness, but I want to learn. I want to be better." I sat across from her, my heart aching. I had prayed for this moment, for her to finally see what really mattered. And yet, when it came, it wasn't triumph I felt, it was relief. "Candace," I said softly, "life isn't about the things you own. It's about the people you hold on to when everything else falls apart. And no matter what you said to me, or how much it hurt, I want you to know this. You're still family." Her face crumbled then, and she wept quietly into her hands. The days that followed weren't magical. They weren't easy. Candace didn't suddenly become warm and gentle overnight, but something in her shifted. She began helping in the kitchen, awkwardly at first, then more naturally. She asked me questions about Devon's childhood, about the recipes I made, about the flowers in the garden. Small steps, but steps all the same. Devon, too, seemed lighter. He laughed more, spoke more, worked harder to rebuild not just his career but his place in this home. The guilt in his eyes slowly gave way to gratitude. And me, for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. My house was full, again, not of noise and mockery, but of people trying, failing, and trying again. One evening, as the sun set over the backyard, I watched Devon and Candace sitting together on the bench my husband built so long ago. They weren't draped in jewels or sipping champagne in a mansion. They were just two tired, flawed people leaning on each other, with nothing but the fading light around them. And I realized something. They had left my house once, full of pride and illusions, thinking they were too good for it. Now they had come back, not with riches, not with power, but with the one thing they had been missing all along. Humility. And maybe, just maybe, a chance at something real. I closed the door that night with a quiet smile, whispering to myself, this house may not be a palace, but it will always be a home.